We're going to jump in the gospel story to the 27th chapter of Matthew. It's now Thursday night. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You say so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" But he gave no answer, not even a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that innocent man. For today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him." Now, the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. The governor said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus who is called the Messiah?" All of them said, "Let him be crucified." Then he asked, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they all shouted it all the more, "Let him be crucified." So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." Then the people as a whole answered, "His blood be upon us and on our children." So he released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus to the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thrones into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they came upon a man from Cyrene named Simon. They compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall, but he tasted it and would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down there and kept watching over him. Over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." Then 2 bandits were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he wants to, for he said, 'I am God's Son.'" The bandits who were crucified with him also taunted him in the same way. From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. At about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani?" That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "This man is calling for Elijah." At once, one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. But the others said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come and save him." Then Jesus called out in a loud voice and breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. After his resurrection, they came out of the tombs and entered the holy city and appeared to many. Now, when the centurion who was with him, who were keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what took place, and they were terrified and said, "Truly, this man is God's Son." The Gospel of the Lord. Well, we went from Hosanna in the highest heavens to Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani in a great rush this morning. It must have seemed the same for the disciples and Jesus' followers who were with him that week. They went from the processional on Sunday with the palm branches and the cloaks on the ground and the people shouting and the disciples going, "Yeah, that's my guy. That's Jesus. I've been with him since the start. That's him. I knew him back when." They went from that to utter sorrow and abject fear that they might be next, all in a very short week's time. Imagine this. Sunday is the parade, and Monday, the trouble starts. Monday, Jesus goes to the temple and sees the money changers and the animal traders, and he turns over the tables of the money changers. He makes a whip and he chases people out that are selling animals for sacrifices and changing of the money, crying, "You have made my Father's house a den of thieves." That didn't make him any more popular with the church leaders at the time. And then Jesus spends the rest of the week in the temple grounds in spite of the danger that surrounded him at all times, because the leaders were getting more and more upset with him, knowing that they really only had one choice of what to do with him. People who were near him that week heard many great parables. They heard about the greatest commandment when a lawyer came up and tried to trick him and said, "Teacher, which is the greatest of the commandments?" And Jesus said, "The first is love the Lord your God with all your heart, and all your soul, and all your mind, and all your strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments stand all of the law and all of the prophets." They heard Jesus denouncing the scribes and the Pharisees, again riling them more and more. And they heard about Jesus talking about destroying the temple and building it back in 3 days. And then those closest with Jesus shared the Passover meal with him, the Last Supper. Then there was the betrayal and the trial and the crucifixion and the death and the burial. Did you happen to hear in the reading of the gospel what happened while Jesus was hanging on the cross? It said from noon on, darkness came over the whole land. And Jesus cried, my God, why have you forsaken me? And later, he cried out again and breathed his last. And at that very moment, the temple curtain was torn in two, and the earth shook, and the rocks were split. And the centurion said, indeed, this was the Son of God. Over the last 4 weeks or so, our earth has been shaken, and our rocks have been split. As I mentioned in the gospel story, by this time the disciples were filled with sorrow and with fear. I don't get the sense that too many of us are living in abject fear like the disciples were, that we might be the next to get this virus. But I do think that most of us are being appropriately cautious. The numbers from New York and other countries such as Italy and Spain are absolutely devastating. God has blessed each of us with good brains and with the ability to reason, to use common sense. So you don't need me to tell you how to keep yourself safe. That's on the news every morning and every night. What I do want to tell you is that in our stories of Palm Sunday, that day has come and gone. The sorrow and fear of Good Friday may be here, but Sunday is coming. It's right around the corner. The cross is just the beginning. It's where God showed his true love for us. The disciples thought that they had lost Jesus, their leader, their friend, their Savior forever. We know that Jesus had an incredible surprise in store for them on Sunday. All of God's promises come to fruition on this Friday and Saturday and Sunday. Those promises of God with us are what we can cling to as we work together through this pandemic. This is not the first time that God's children have been in deep despair. God has always protected God's children, and God will once again keep God's promises and hold us